Welcome to another session of Female Disruptors Women in the Metaverse, and I am happy to introduce Samantha Wolfe. Hey Samantha, how are you?
Hi, nice to see you, Lisa.
Good, just a quick intro. So I just happen to have this is how I met Samantha, is she was working with Kathy Hackle, co-authoring Marketing New Realities, and I wrote the foreword. So that was back, and I was like, when was this? Seems like forever ago, 2017. Talking about AR, VR, and marketing. And it's, still semi-evergreen. So
yeah, no, I mean, as evergreen as you can be within emerging tech.
yeah, definitely. And Samantha is a professor at NYU, where she teaches students about emerging tech, AR, VR, and the metaverse. And one of the things what we are going to focus on today is talking about a brand strategy, but leading up to what exactly does that mean with the metaverse and the tech side of things. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to take questions at the end, the last 10 minutes, and I'm going to turn it over to Samantha. She's got a full deck of presentation and so excited to learn from Samantha.
Yeah, no, I have a huge deck. Nobody's ever accused me of not talking enough in my whole life. So really excited to get going. So Lisa introduced me. Today we're going to talk, I generally sort of call it Enter the Metaverse. I feel like one of my jobs or roles that I just do, sort of assigned to myself, is to help people understand emerging technologies, basically so that they can be inspired to come up with their own sort of fun ideas. And so that's how I'm approaching the deck. So I don't know how many of you sort of are familiar with the technology, not familiar with the technology. Is there a sense, Lisa, is it from all directions?
Yeah, I feel like so far for the day that we have a mix there. It's definitely 101. There's some that are familiar, the way that I look at it is that, I can hear things multiple times, the same thing from multiple people, and I learn something new every time. So
okay, so I'll get going with my presentation, and then we can go from there. Okay, just pulling it up. So enter the metaverse. So our day today. So the general overview for this presentation for me, we're going to do some of the abouts, goals for the presentation, go over some of the definitions, the technologies, and then what I think are sort of the opportunities. I generally come about all of this when as it relates to sort of marketing and branding in general. Whether it be marketing of the technologies or how marketers can use the technologies. So hopefully that last bit, I'm going to attempt, fingers crossed, to spend the most time there, because I think that's probably the most helpful. But I do want to sort of get over that initial hump of understanding, just in case. Lisa's already sort of said a little bit about me. It's like you do the VR headset pose that everybody sort of does. So I founded Pitch Forward with this idea of accelerating adoption of emerging technologies, with the idea that if people understand it, then they're more likely to buy. My company, we work on brand and marketing strategy, developers, innovators, early adopters, prep for investors, all that kind of stuff, and lots of thought leadership, which is fun. And here are some of the companies that we've worked with. And now to today's talk. So goals for today. Understand the conflicting sort of definitions, and maybe sort of even figure out how you would define the metaverse. Be able to recognize some of those technologies involved, especially sort of AR and VR, which are clearly not the only technologies involved, but I think it's helpful to understand those too, so you can sort of understand the larger concept of the metaverse, and then define the opportunities of how to get involved. So the definition debate, I'd like read in my headlines. So all this talk about the metaverse, happened or really sort of started happening in October, where I have like sort of the short little clip.
Hey,
This
and
guy.
welcome to Connect. Today, we're going to talk about the metaverse. I want to share what we imagine is possible, the experiences you'll have, the creative economy we'll all build, and the technology that needs to be invented, as well as.
So what happened sort of after that is that everybody started to talk about it. And the thing is that I thought interesting, and actually Jim Cramer, if you've ever watched his stuff, I actually think that he's a very smart guy. But this kind of thing happened, and excuse me if I laugh at Jim Cramer for a little bit, but it really sort of showed that people didn't understand what was going on.
That you have to go to the Unity conference call first quarter, which really explains what the metaverse is, which is the idea that you're looking at basically, you can be an Oculus, whatever, and you say, I like the way that person looks in that shirt. I want to order that shirt. And it's all, ultimately it's an NVIDIA, based on NVIDIA. And when I was at NVIDIA with Jensen Huang, what happens, it's conceivable. Okay, Dave, listen to me.
I'm reading what Zuckerberg has to say about it.
He didn't tell you enough.
No, he did.
Say, no, he didn't.
A persistent synchronous environment where we can be together, which I think is probably going to resemble some kind of a hybrid between the social platforms we see today, but an environment where you're embodied in it.
Okay.
That tells me what it is.
Well, no.
It's a holodeck.
It is a hologram.
Yeah, it's like Star Trek.
Ultimately, you could go into a room. Let's say you're alone and you're a little lonely, okay? And you like classical music. Well, you go into the room and you say to the first person you see, "Do you think that you like the Mozart, the Hafner?" And then the second person says, "Before you listen to Hafner, if you've listened to Beethoven's Ninth, let me tell you, these people don't exist." Okay,
understood.
That's the metaverse.
Or maybe you can even talk to them. Well, Mozart.
So with that, you get it, right? Understand what the metaverse is? Of course you don't. It makes no sense. What he's saying, is sort of like pulling little bits of information and the different companies involved in the terms. And he's like, holodeck, no holograms. And so it ends up being a little overwhelming. And so it just started this sort of discussion. All I had to do is like, metaverse, what is the metaverse? And I got like tons and tons and tons of articles, everybody trying to explain it. Lots of people defining it. There's terms out there about like the next generation of the internet, world that connects physical with digital. Some people replace it with Web3, which it is not, it's different. They talk about a blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFT, like all these words all together. And although the image on the right is something from a very long time ago, I still like using it. There's also these talk about all the different layers, and like these two companies disagree about what the layers are. It just starts getting more and more confusing. So the way that I like to talk about it, or I like to think about it, is that the metaverse is a culmination of a wide variety of emerging technologies maturing simultaneously. And I know that that still is a little bit of like, well, that's still gray area, but I think I like that in this idea of you have so many technologies that are maturing, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, and that what are they going to make? When they all come together, what would you, if you got all of those pieces, you got the AI over here and the AR and you're like, what could we make that everybody could experience, that ultimately you would come up with the metaverse? And so the other part of this is that this tech revolution will create a new interactive dimension impacting each of our everyday lives. So I've said this before, basically it's really hard to think of a technology that is going to entirely shift how we interact. I like to think of it as if you knew about the internet before the internet launched, or if you knew about mobile phones before mobile phones launched. And so you couldn't have quite predicted, if somebody explained the internet, how it will change your life. But the people who were working on it at the time knew that. So it's like the Halt and Catch Fire TV show, which is so fun to watch if you're in this space, because you're like, oh, I remember when you know, I have those conversations where it's all the technology people saying, this is going to change everything. And everybody else going, yeah, right, we'll see. So one part of it, if you look at this sort of the culmination of a wide variety of emerging technologies, is this is actually what some people have called the fourth industrial revolution. And I like this because it reminds you that there are these sort of shifts in technology that happen over time that you probably learned about in your history class, of like the steam engine and how that changed and people could travel across the country now, and the like electricity on the industrial revolution, and then computing, internet, yay. And then now we're at this sort of like next revolution where we have all these new technologies coming and emerging together. And so this concept was actually introduced in 2016, so it's not an entirely new idea. I think that the way it interconnects is a little bit, you know, a little bit different. But so, and then I was able to actually track down the video from the World Economic Forum from 2016, which I think is sort of like interesting in how it was even sort of predicted then. So even if you think, hey, it's one person talking about this, or it's a bunch of people, and like, I'm not really going to get serious about it. That was 2016 saying there's going to be a shift. And so there can be a little bit of disagreement about what specifically that shift will be. But I think that even understanding the technologies that are a part of this sort of bigger shift to the metaverse is going to be helpful for you as marketers or communicators or whatever industry you're in, just so you can say like, okay, what's going to happen in the next few years and how can I plan for it? Not only is there this concept of the fourth industrial revolution, there's also somebody else who says it's the sixth wave of innovation. Like all of these, there's a lot of, oh gosh, so many new technologies, what do we do? And then everybody also talks about Web3 and how things are going. And so like all these people who are making these sort of bigger predictions based on lots of data information are like, we're at a time to shift. So, so it's good to sort of understand and review and define sort of like what makes this kind of metaverse, what makes it up together. So this sort of future of the metaverse is supposed to be interactive with sort of a twin of a person, place, or thing. It's persistent, it's interconnected, it's inoperable, all these things. It's basically going to work. That is what all of these, all these specifics are, is going to work. I actually wrote a piece in LinkedIn and Medium that really goes into depth about, you know, sort of what are the characteristics that a lot of people that are writing about it have found that like everybody sort of agrees on. And for me, it's going to work seamlessly. It's just the equivalent of you turn on your computer or your mobile phone and you get the internet. It's you turn on your AR device and there is the metaverse. And so if you work in the industry, it's good for you to know more than that in a whole lot of detail. If you work outside the industry, you just think that eventually it will all work together. So again, this idea that the metaverse is a culmination of a wide variety of emerging technologies maturing simultaneously, and it will create this sort of interactive dimension. So to understand what that dimension is and what I'm even talking about when it comes to dimension, I think that you have to have sort of a basic understanding of at least AR and VR. And AI is helpful too, but I think that AR and VR are about that sort of additional dimension more than the other technologies out there. So again, here we said all the different kinds of emerging technologies that are coming together. So basic question that, you know, either you may or may not know as sort of like, what is virtual reality? And I'm going super basic here of it's a thing you put on your head where you feel like you're somewhere else and your body is sort of tricked. And there's this term sixed off, which basically means that the world sort of persists and exists. And if you move within it, the world doesn't change. So imagine if you could sort of create a, if we were all in the same room together, that the room would exist and that we could sort of walk within it, and that room wouldn't change if we sat down in a chair, the chair would still be there. Everything sort of exists around you in this sort of virtual world. When it comes to augmented reality, now augmented reality is more of an overlaid experience. So when you tend to see it or tend to interact with it, if you're just sort of, you know, a general market person, it's probably on your phone, something like Snapchat. And honestly, a lot of the kids that are in my class, the only time they come across augmented reality, they don't know what the term is, and they only know Snapchat and overlays and facial facial filters. So there's so much more going into this, and this is actually the hardware for the metaverse that everybody is betting on, that eventually not only would you have maybe your computer or your phone, but you'd also have your glasses as your hardware as well. And so there are examples of it that are already happening in the enterprise space for you know, construction and manufacturing and things like that, where they're already using them. UPS has been using augmented reality glasses for a very long time, at least emerging tech-wise. That gives us 5-10 years. But so what is fun about this technology, and especially the way it's starting to evolve, is not only is it becoming aware of what's around you and recognizing, hey, that's a couch, that's a chair, those are the walls, there's the floor, but now you can sort of start to interact with it more than just having it sort of exist in the room. I think that early augmented reality consumer experiences were like, isn't it fun? You put the dancing guy over there in the corner of your room. And then like, I think for a brand, it's like, so what? Like, it's really like, eh. And now you can start thinking like, what else could we do? What else can we make it so that it becomes a more real experience, a more useful experience, a more valuable experience. And as the technology evolves, it's going to become more and more that way. The other term, just in case you hear it, is called mixed reality. This is truly like Microsoft use it more than anything else. It is effectively with their HoloLens, which is on the bottom of it blurry, and it's saying that it's sort of an augmented reality, but you interact with it a whole lot more. They just built it to be interactive from the start. So as the rest of augmented reality becomes more and more interactive, that name is sort of blurry with augmented reality. The other things to think about when you think about augmented reality in the sort of broader sense, you could think of the smart mirrors as examples, and even the sort of heads-up displays in your car. So some people have thought that eventually we'll get to a situation where you would have experiences in your car, if you have a driverless car, that you'll have the opportunity to have more brand experiences there. Right now, it's just sort of more, a simple graphics. Okay. Other technology terms, and hopefully this is just like, again, super basic, is spatial audio, just understanding that it's going to be more important. Your right ear and your left ear, if you turn around, you still want whatever is coming from that particular direction to stay there. It just creates more of a sense of place. And people, like, for some reason, with all these technologies, like, it does feel a little scary if you're outside of tech to hear all these terms. And so I really try my best to simplify, and I'm trying my best to simplify many, many terms in a very short period of time. But the other thing that people talk a lot about is game engines, which are obviously built for games. But if you look at the picture on the right, to me, that sort of helps me understand it a little bit. It's basically, if you have a space, like a virtual space that you're working in, if it's VR, so it's like multiple places you can walk around and move around and go up and down, or augmented reality space that, like, you're walking outside and something's going to happen, you need to understand what's going to happen where in the space and maybe in what order. And so game engines are really good at doing that. They also sort of add logic in it, like if you're going to have a balloon in your augmented reality place or virtual reality, that they actually have the physics engine to say, well, do you want the balloon to go? How fast do you want it to float? How big do you want it? If it pops, how should it pop? Like all these kinds of questions, because you are creating, you're creating a new reality. Another fun one for me, all these I think are fun, but that's my own personal opinion, is LiDAR is becoming more and more ubiquitous on some of the advanced phones. LiDAR basically is like if you've heard of radar or sonar, and it uses light waves for measurement, creating a point cloud. And basically, if you can see on the right, again, sort of picture that I like of like, see, it can see where the chair is. And it's basically computer vision, like it can see where the chair is, and then you can understand what's happening there. And so what's really cool that can happen, and this is where your mind, hopefully creative mind, starts thinking, is that if you get something like LiDAR and you understand what's happening in the world, that you can overlay experiences on top of it. And so this was just sort of Snapchat showing what you could do when finally you can see the room. But I think for me, it's like, I don't know, it just really inspired me to go, okay, well, what do I want to have happen in my room if I were a brand, like in that person's room? What kinds of things do you want to see? This is how showing how it's sort of mapping. And so you wouldn't necessarily, I mean, maybe if you're Crayola, you'd want to color everything, but you go, what would be fun in that particular room to do? And one of the big things to remember about AR, especially as we move to glasses, is it's really entering your personal space, right? So it's not, you don't want to see a big brand in your room, but instead, if you create something that would be sort of fun to do, but it is branded, then it works a little bit better. You have to think of, if it were physically there in the room, what would you want to do? And here's some of the graphics. So they're showing what to do within their engine. And if you're sort of scared about some of this in all these terms, generally there's a movement towards what they call no code and low code kinds of programs that are out there. So you don't necessarily have to be able to develop yourself. You just have to have the creativity. And so although I'm potentially overwhelming you with a lot of terms, and maybe you end up watching this over and over again, you can always reach out to me. But these are so the terms that I hear pop up over and over again that are nice ones to know if you're going to be starting to create marketing or branding campaigns in the space. The other one, another lovely term, digital twin, it sort of speaks for itself, but there's going to be more and more of that, where you end up having basically the twin in augmented or virtual reality. What it's really good for from an enterprise and like B2B standpoint is that you can test things without actually testing the real car. But it also allows you that if you have those files and if you're a marketer, you can put the actual car in an experience that you might have been difficult to do before. So if you talk to people who are developing the digital twin on, maybe you're working for the car company, you say, do you have a digital twin of the car? I'd love to have a version of that so I can use it in our campaign, or give it to our design team to use in our campaign. And then the other thing to just, this is my like super, it's super weird and creepy, but super fun, is this sort of movement towards avatars and virtual humans. I think as we start talking about the metaverse more and more, if you're living in that sort of augmented world or virtual world, you're going to be thinking a lot about what are you represented as, and how would a brand represent itself within a sort of in the metaverse. And in some ways it's really fun because you can be whatever you want to be, any kind of being. And on the flip side, there are all these tools that are being built that make like it look like real people. And so this is one where it's Unreal sort of metahuman, and you can see how close we're getting graphic wise as an emerging technology to having things really look human. You know, ethics and aside, I deal a lot with that with my students, but just from like, wow, there's still a little bit of, you get that sort of uncanny valley, something feels a little bit weird about it, and the eyes and the micro expressions aren't quite perfect yet, but boy, are we getting close. So at least just thinking about how an avatar virtual human could work within your campaign, even eventually, is sort of a good thing to think about. Okay, so lots of opportunities. One thing to just sort of set expectations here a little bit is that, you know, I'm very biased in that I love innovation, and I love developers, and I love learning about new technologies and seeing how potentially they could be applied, not just in sort of branding, you know, in marketing ways. I actually covered over 20 industries in my business of AR and VR class. And so I like to see like, how is innovation going to change all these different industries? But what really matters if you're dealing with sort of consumer marketing, or even B2B marketing, is like, well, how interesting is innovation for the rest of people? And sort of overall, it is interesting. I think if you're dealing with innovators and early adopters, they're more interested than most, but it's good to know that just trying to do something a little bit more innovative is going to help your marketing goals. And so I have 10 different ways. This is a lot. I know this is a lot, but hopefully you understand some of them sort of overlap a little bit, but I do like grouping. Anybody who knows me knows I like a bullet point. If you see a bullet point in Marketing New Realities, that was, chances are it was my bullet point. Kathy would tell you that. And I even have bullet points in my posts where I like to just use words to just help structure it. So one of the obvious ways to use the metaverse or AR or VR, this sort of new like spatialized experience, advertising. So the only thing about it is that for me, just putting up the ad, like, really? I think it's more fun to think about, like, how could you advertise that would be a little bit different, sort of shake things up a bit. And although I do not love this burn the ad by Burger King, I do think that as an example of what you can do in augmented reality that changes it up a bit, I appreciate. So that if you don't know that ad, it was basically that if your phone recognized the ad of competitor to Burger King, it would burn the ad and then like virtually on your phone, and then you would get some kind of like discount with it. So I don't condone violence, but it was like, how do we change it so it's not just an ad, not just sort of the placement, and it's more engaging. Okay, enhance. So this is like, how can you take an existing experience and sort of level it up using these technologies? So one example of this is in, football stadiums. I think this was in Dallas, that you could, they did volumetric capture of the players. And so when you went on the field, you could sort of see them above the stadium. You could have experiences inside. There's in cars now, if it recognizes, again, using some of that AI to recognize what what's on the dashboard, that you can like figure out how to do things easier. And although not everybody thinks of it as augmented reality, this on the right and the bottom was with the Weather Channel, that instead of just saying the water went, however many 10 feet high, they use graphics within it. So it is augmenting through the camera. It's a little bit different. Instead of through your phone, it's that, Weather Channel really has sort of bought into these kind of technologies to help and advance their what they're doing. Okay, this was one that was sort of cute and fun that I don't know if we necessarily have time for, but I would look up what Walmart's doing just in general. Walmart is a great example of integrating in-store sort of consumer experiences, but also training and behind the scenes. And this one was just like Waffles and Mochi, the Netflix show, and it would do object recognition like of the tomatoes and then have a little graphic on top. Oops, let's keep going. Experience, so creating whether it be scanned or virtual or magic window, whatever it is, like how can we use these technologies, use the metaverse to create a new kind of experience for people? I mean, I think that is a great question to ask as a marketer or brand person. And then within that, can you offer sort of access or exclusivity? That's like a basic sort of marketing thing that it goes over so well. It always works. I love it. So it's like, we only have these exclusive digital goods. We only have this, only this number of people can attend this experience. Or even if you haven't heard of like the ABBA experience in London, ABBA got scanned in there because they're alive and they got scanned and like de-aged, so that now there's an experience that you can pay tickets for, where you see ABBA, the sort of like virtual group, actually perform, but it's, the sort of avatars of performance. So it's experience in a whole lot of different ways, right? It's experience within VR, it's experience something in augmented reality that didn't exist before. The bottom left one's sort of an old one of like, what is it like to have a migraine headache? Not necessarily the most fun thing to experience, but that was what the brand goals was to have people understand what it's like. So it can be used for like super fun things like a Nike Land, or it could be for something where you just have to like create amount of empathy for that situation. The other thing that's happened sometimes recently is actually creating a virtual world from scratch. South by Southwest did that in 2001, and this sort of became a sort of fantastical look at what they have going on. So I'm gonna move from there. Play. I mean, like, how can we get our potential customers to play with what we're doing? So one is an obvious, like, there's the Domino's box where you could play Pac-Man. This is my like favorite one. Hopefully, yeah, good. It's not. It is from 2014, but I think I will still be using it in like 10 years because it's still one of my favorites of just creating a new experience where one hadn't been before. And effectively what they did is they made it so that if you looked at the bus, like sort of the kiosk or whatever, it's not kiosk, there's a different name for it, but whatever, and that you think that you're seeing something. So it's almost like creating an augmented reality screen pass-through experience. And this was, you know, pre when everybody was doing stuff on Snapchat. So everybody was like, whoa, what's going on? We need to take videos. And I just think it was just such a fun kind of interaction and creating it in sort of a new place. Represent. So this is a lot of the virtual human kind of things in virtual skins. You know, if you're a fashion company, you absolutely need to be looking into this for sure, and you probably are. Showcase, it's still a little bit on that same thing, experiences. So like, how can you display what you're doing? Particularly like if there's a lot of movement within home products and home goods of like, because it's, if you are within a person's home, showing what, you know, the furniture looks like IKEA has, is a really sort of easy, natural kind of experience to have, or even sort of the virtual try-ons. Seeing what your car looks like in your house, I probably wouldn't have used that as an image. I might have done it like on the driveway as a sample image, but that's what they did. Maybe you just want to see what it looks like up close. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity also at retail, especially can figure out how to connect the experience so that it seems very seamless from home. You look at something, you go to the store, and potentially they like know who you are, inventory, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of logistics that would have to go into having something like that happen. But in the research I've done, that really is something that's expected and doesn't always happen. So lots of data on this. If you ever need to prove to your boss or your CEO that there should be some investment in this technology, especially if you have a particular product, there's a lot of data out there on why it's expected and why it's effective. Same for just like, if you want to just sell stuff, that I think that there's more of a movement to like click to purchase kind of augmented reality, as opposed to sort of you click on the augmented reality item and then you go to the website and then you enter your whatever. That's so much friction. And so if you could create less friction, then you have more chance of selling. Sharing is always good. I think shared experiences, this was sort of a fun one, showing just what could happen if you have multiplayer in augmented reality. And I know this is more of a game, but I think that if you think about like, okay, we want to include augmented reality, we want to make it a little bit more fun, and you want to do something a little bit different, then thinking about how could we create, you know, sort of multi-person shared experiences, that is something that hasn't necessarily been tapped into as much as it should. It has in a broad sense of, you know, millions of people playing a particular game, but not if it's like you and your friend go and do something, or you and a group of friends go and look at the same exact object all at the same time, as opposed to sort of separately, but that's getting into technical details. Okay, share, let's go test. Okay, not generally thought of as like something you would do from like a B2B or internal standpoint, but I think it's really good to know, especially if you're on the consumer side, that if you have something like augmented reality and virtual reality, the idea of testing and A/B testing and figuring out how to use your experiences to see if they're effective, I think that these are great technologies for that. So if you build that in, knowing when you're developing the creative brief, that boy, along the way, you want to be able to test, you want to get data, you want to prove the value, do it. Like just have that be built in to what you're doing. It is sort of that great environment to be able to accomplish that and get that elusive word that I have issues with, but I still use a lot, of engagement. How engaged are people in the play? How long are they there for? What are they doing? How are they interacting? Especially if you move eventually to glasses, then you're really going to understand where people are looking. And then training. So again, a little bit more of a B2B, but I do think that you can think of, if you want a consumer to potentially go and do something, and then you pull in all this, like if you want to do gamification, if you want to do experience, or you want to do whatever, you can even look at the ways that from a B2B standpoint that there's been some training materials, and you say, what can we do here? One thing that I thought of that, again, it's sort of a retail environment, hasn't happened that much, probably would be very difficult to do, might not happen for a few years, but if you take that retail environment, right? So you're, okay, I'm gonna buy this pair of shoes. Okay, I wanna go to the actual physical environment, because if you're Gen Z, you wanna touch it, you wanna feel what that leather really feels like, or actually it wouldn't be leather, the synthetic leather feels like, to figure out if it's, if it feels good or if it doesn't feel good. So you go to that retail environment, you touch it, and then there would be some kind of thing to figure out from the inventory whether it's in store or not in store, and you could click to purchase. But what would be really fun is that if there are not enough people who are salespeople on the floor, potentially there could be somebody that can interact with you live while you're there. Not something that I've seen happen, but I do think it's something that a company could work towards. KFC training, a little bit weird, but they really were trying to like gamify how to cook the chicken in a way that's not like a realistic environment. So again, if you have the opportunity to, put anything anywhere in your world, think, can it be something not realistic? Could it be something sort of fantastical or different? That's really, just, try to push the boundaries a bit. Again, so to go back to the beginning, and hopefully, I know there's a lot of information, but so to recap, so we went through sort of understanding that there's a lot of definitions out there, a lot of visions, a lot of people are going like, what is this metaverse thing? But just to think about it as a lot of emerging tech coming together, going to change the way that we interact with the world and make it so that it has this sort of like extra dimensionality, and it's not just sort of a flat computer screen. Understand that there are a lot of technologies involved. Now, if you focus on one or the other, I would just try to experience a little bit more of virtual reality, a whole lot more of augmented reality, to start saying, okay, what is this? How could I use this and use it differently? And there is so much opportunity to use it differently, because we are still sort of at the beginning of it. And then define the opportunities. I had that list of like 10, I'm sure that there's more than that. Always what somebody had told me once is look at what people have done, but then look at it and say, that's really cool, but what could I have done differently? What could I do better next time? As opposed to sort of the copying. And so here is that list again, that overwhelming list of advertising, enhancing, experiencing, figure out how to play with it, ways to represent what you're doing, how to sell it, how to share experiences or share socially even, but that's sort of, everybody sort of knows that, but share experiences, showcase, test, train. And here's my contact information. You can reach out on LinkedIn, Samantha G. Wolfe, or Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, asking random questions and commenting on things. And that's it. I did it, Lisa.
You did it. Yay, yay. So we have, we have like maybe like 6 or 7 minutes for cute questions. I have a question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I really love, like, I'm just intrigued of the whole meta-human, and I just, I love Deepak Chopra, and he came out with, I think it was like about a year ago, the digital Deepak, where, it's going to continue his legacy, and he's trained his digital self to meditate and answer questions. And, after he's gone, digital Deepak is going to continue on. And there's that. And then there's the, basically instead of hiring an influencer, you could just create a digital human, your perfect influencer.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's, I did
there's
this
so
whole...
much there. And that actually is what I'm going to work on in a few months. Because I think that you can think of virtual humans or avatars, even at the, like something like an Alexa or a bot, like it is sort of that interaction. And then you go, okay, well, what if that kind of interaction actually was a being of some sort? And there's been, examples of mascots for a long time. And so now it's like, okay, well, if you make that mascot a little bit more real, either it can look like a human or not look like a human, and have it sort of like, what kind of interactions we have, what would they do? All of these kinds of questions are such like branding questions and brand strategy questions that if you've, worked in that field or worked with somebody, right, it's like, what is that person like? If your brand was a person, what would they do? And how would they talk? And then now you go, okay, guess what? You get to now actually create one or create a few. And there's going to be even more experimentation, I think, as things get more and more real. There's going to be a lot of hacking and drama and all that other sort of stuff too. But I think that it just is, it'll be really fun to see within or separate or apart from the metaverse, how that evolves.
Samantha, you did a great job at really like outlining, all of the different options. And yeah, it is a lot, but I mean, I think for the first time I've seen it packaged the way you have, so that it really makes sense. And it's really interesting. I don't know if you agree, but it seems like when you and Kathy wrote the book, virtual reality was more in the lead, I would say, than augmented. And now augmented is now in the lead versus virtual.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you go, oh, I'm going to hurt myself as I pat myself on the back. Like when the two of us were doing it, the whole book initially was going to be all VR. And then we started hearing about AR Core and AR Kit being launched, which basically means like the programming languages for AR. And we went, oh no, we need to, even though AR at the time was not a big deal, we went through the entire draft of the book before it came out and said, how would this apply for AR also? Like where, where is it the same kind of thing? Like I had the gall to sort of say, if I were like Jeremy Bailenson, which I am not, but Jeremy Bailenson is like, masterful researcher when it comes to VR and interactions, like what would I do? What would I create for like the list of like what makes an AR interaction real, and it was just like sitting there imagining a future. And so that, I think, just in general is absolutely my favorite part of working in emerging tech, is there's so much, well, what if, what would happen if you did this, if you did that, and like trying to figure out not just what is exciting because it's technically possible, but what would be exciting for somebody who isn't tech savvy to experience themselves, exciting or helpful or useful, like whatever the value is to them. That's like my favorite part for sure. And I love doing it with CEOs too, who know exactly what's possible. And I'm like, could you do this? And they're like, I hadn't thought of that. Yes. And then it can sort of influence what happens. And hopefully, I mean, I'm trying to be the mind of the customer, the consumer for them, especially with the smaller technology companies that don't have the big budgets to do research. It's sort of like spend a lot of time going, would that work? And it's the best. It's honestly the best.
We have one quick question.
Sure.
Susan is asking if you are an artist, painter, or a teacher, painter-teacher, where can she get started at a reasonable price or training?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're what is really fun for me, and one of the things that I had noticed in emerging tech in general is that artists are sort of the first to play with some of these emerging technologies. So, you know, if you have a phone with apps, there are a lot of different sort of AR creative drawing kind of apps where you can place things in the room. Again, they're not going to be as sophisticated interactions yet as they would be. If you have VR, like the sort of entry level, but also really good place to start is with the Quest 2, and they're like drawing experiences there. And there were so many of them sold during the holidays that maybe you have a friend and you do some real COVID wiping of it. And then you say, are there any drawing applications? Which there are, and there are a bunch that are free. I think what is the most important for anyone in this space, if they aren't familiar with it, is understanding that sort of depth thing that is now happening and the movement within multidimensional space. I like to almost think of like pretending that your room is a space, and like if your room was an igloo and you were trying to sell, they always sell ice cream in igloos, which makes no sense, but it's like, what would you do there? Like, and not from sitting down, but like, how would you move around? What kinds of things would be interesting to experience? And that can happen, you know, in a fully occluded VR thing, like VR experience, or it could be like something where you sort of see it a little bit in its augmented reality, and like, what kinds of things would you do that would be fun, but yet remind people of ice cream, or whatever it might be. I mean, that's where I tend to do a lot of moving around to sort of embody a pretend experience, to just get a sense of what's possible.
Awesome, Samantha. You are a wealth of information. We could sit here for 3 hours, but we
That's
have
why I
another
said I
session
can make
starting.
this a 3-hour one.
Yeah,
but
maybe we'll do a bonus one where you
No,
can
no,
have just Q&A or something. But
yeah, no, it's really what I'm hoping is, you know, what I'd like to do is just like give people enough information that they can go off and like be creative. And I feel like I'm not creative. I'm not super creative, and I'm not super technical, but boy, I like to help the people that are on both sides really succeed with what they do. And then I could be there helping to make sure that they, oh, thank you, Nava, that they can make money. I mean, that's really what, even if you're a nonprofit, I've argued with clients who are nonprofits, I'm like, you still have to make money because you want your business to keep going. So I sort of look at it from that perspective while allowing the sort of freedom and understanding of the customer to take place at the same time.
Samantha, thank you so much. This has been amazing. If you're here as a VIP, you could win a one-on-one with Samantha. So that would be really exciting and very valuable. And we appreciate you. Thank you for being a female disruptor. And our next session is starting in about less than 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. It's fun.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. See you on the next session.